Hello and welcome everybody to this, the first DIY session in Groundswell ever. We've got there. It may be in the grass tent, but we're there, and I'm grateful to John for pressing, John Cherry that is, for pressing our argument, no doubt, for years and years. I'm Mike Donovan. I do a magazine called Practical Farm Ideas, and you've got these, I've splashed the leaflets around. The magazine is, or my life is focused on things that people have made and adapted in farm workshops. And here we have a collection of four. I mean, we're extremely lucky to have them because they're busy and they have all sorts of ideas which you can agree with and disagree with, but the whole basis of it is that they think outside the box and they try and get the in order to have a system that works financially and in every other way. I'm going to introduce John Hawkins to you, and he is from Norfolk? Dorset. Yes, get it right. Yes, he's from Dorset, and he has been working on machinery on his own farm for quite some time. So, without any more, could I introduce you, John?
Absolutely, thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. I've got to keep it quick. We're going to be demoing our system at the top northwest corner of the showground at 5 o'clock tonight, and again tomorrow at 2:30 for those of you here for 2 days. So a picture speaks 1,000 words, but equally doing it, not just talking about it, is 10,000 words, I think. That's a dissertation. Very quickly, I didn't make, obviously, all of it myself. I just adapted what someone else had made. So we must acknowledge companies like New Holland, John Deere, and all the other brands. But this isn't about the brands, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone. This is about farmers using the kit they've got at their disposal to make something, to do a job for them, to preferably save some money or make them some money, and more importantly, as Fred Thomas will be saying in the other tent, have some time off for holiday. So what you're seeing there on your screen is some of the stuff we've mucked about with in the past. It all works, it all does different jobs, but it's all about developing what you're doing, trying to do it better, and hopefully earn a better living per hectare, per hour, use whatever metric you like. We used to use, we made that cross-cutter thing there. That was a couple of years ago. It basically is 3 different bits of machinery. It's my front plough press where I remove the press. It's an old folding system that I had on a really old bit of kit. And then a company created some cutting blades, which I bought ex-demo. Then last year, we thought we were getting really good at this no-tilling game. Then my beautiful brand new tractor I just bought on HP over 6 weeks, and an old Vardstat Rapide caught fire in the field. So you go, whoopsie, luckily an insurance company many of you might use paid out. So we had a chance to have another look at how we plant our crops. That was in the autumn. That's basically a bit of cover crop. On the left, it was broadcast. On the right, it was direct drilled. There's nothing wrong with a direct drill, but we chose to move to broadcasting. That is broadcast linseed a few weeks ago. Pretty happy with that. That's had no nitrogen, minimum chemical. One herbicide to remove the cereal element. That's trying out a machine. The machine's on stand. We can also use it as a mower. So 18K, I can basically flatten 2 years of overstood jungle and move that jungle to somewhere else and plant a crop of spring cereal. So that's what we've fallen on. Literally, it's an old fertilizer spinner on the front. You might have one in the back of your shed. I bought a Unimog type PTO from a local dealer, made a little frame, connected it up to the system so that it spun the spinner the other way round. And then on the back, other models are available. We decided to invest in one of these very shallow chopping tools. The loader's now off, but obviously that tractor does quite a lot of different jobs. It's a bog standard old tractor, but it does have a very basic auto steer RTK GPS, which is quite useful when you're trying to judge 4 meter lines. You don't need it, not with this system. It's a mindset. So for about £1,000, we've created not only a topper but a drill and a multi-option machine. And it is a drill. You know, it doesn't physically drill it into the ground, but it does. Right, bit of science. Look it all up later or ask. And you're going, well, why don't you have a 4 metre and a 4 metre matching? Yeah, you can do any combination. It's whatever your mind chooses to do. But we start on the red lines. So it was up, down, up, down. Then we turn the spinner off. We will have double dosed the barley. So we put it on at half rate, or any seed at half rate, except for peas. They'll split, for example. And then we whiz in and fill in the gaps. And it's really quite a quick system. Very cheap. And you'd think, why on earth are you doing that? But now cereal crops are back to their traditional prices. Believe me, there might be a margin in it this year, I hope. That's what it looked like when we whizzed over it in February, because I have no patience. What a silly thing to do. The stuff on the left is wild bird food, so it looks messy and everything else. The stuff on the right is a crop of laureate spring barley, hopefully for malting, if it makes it. It's up to, I don't know, I'm only estimating, with no nitrogen, about 6 tons at least there. So that's quite cool. That's it again. And above and below, same shot. And that was a couple of 2-3 weeks ago. It's looking much better than that now. Every day that goes past, once your soils are in this kind of biological state, which ours have been for 7-8 years now, it's a pretty awesome experience. Getting over that bump in the first few years, as everyone else will tell you, is shockingly hard work. But yeah, you can't help but smile when you do that. Again, triticale, so it's not just barley. You can do triticale, you can do spring wheats, you can do anything. So yeah, like I said, we're going to be up there at 5 o'clock if any of you are still here. We're basically up with lots of other manufacturers who'd like to see you. But you could equally use a muck spreader and put seed in it and open the tailgate. Do not think this is the way to do it. This is about opening your mind. And on that note, I want to hand over to these other 3 gentlemen who will talk about their kit. So if you think you can build it, build it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. That's really, really useful. Now that we now have Stephen Temple. He's got a most extraordinarily lucid flow diagram of his farming system, and I mean, I was fascinated by that. He's largely going to talk about establishing maize. I think that's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. This shows how everything works on our farm, with an anaerobic digester in the middle, putting stuff back into the farm and taking energy from the crops and any wastes we produce. So what we sell is barley, electricity, milk and cheese. Oh, sorry. It's all or nothing here. Go on. Stuck. It's gone. Right. Good. Right. We've gone 2. There we go. Right. We grow maize for the digester and the cows, and about 12 years ago we went to Morley Open Day where they demonstrated strip tilling for beet and rape. We thought if it works for beet and rape, beet on 20-inch rows, it will certainly work for maize on 30-inch rows. Couldn't find a machine in Britain. Found one in France and took a long weekend holiday in France. Saw what they were doing, which is the bottom left corner, and the shoots they were getting, and decided to buy one. And brought it back to the farm, and it's got some winged legs, followed by crinkle discs, followed by the drill. And this worked quite well on stubbles, but we were sort of half ploughing and half strip tilling the maize this year, and we found as we went that the crinkle discs didn't work so well on some soils, so we also had to have disc openers on the drill, so we changed the drill. changed to a monosem drill, and we modified the winged legs with monosem with Metcalfe parts because it was difficult to get the French parts in this country. And we got on quite well with that. Sometimes the ploughed work out-yielded the strip-tilled work. Sometimes it was the other way around. But we were still a little bit short of tilth, so we took an old 60-inch rotavator, extended it with some old irrigation borehole pipe, and made it into a 4-rotor, 3-meter rotavator, but instead of the crinkle discs behind the winged legs. And this is using that outfit drilling into a grass stubble after first cut grass. As the previous speaker said about using GPS, in a heavy cover crop, you will not get a marker to work. So GPS is not necessarily RTK, but GPS of some sort is pretty much essential to see where you're going. This year we got funding from Anglian Water for a cover crop destruction roller, which is a French-made machine, which has one roller that goes on the ground, and in front of that is like a flail that goes at 4 times the speed. So we put that on the front, and then we realized that using that we could then put a spray tank on the front and put our pre-emergent spray in there, so we added another operation, so it's a one-pass operation to get the crop established. And we also fitted shrouds on the rotavator blades, so it sprayed the soil less far apart. I think this year we're going to have to put a new rotavator on, because our bodged rotavator shaft just keeps falling apart and needs welding up every now and then. But this structure roller really needs a non-grass or non-cereal cover crop, so you can get away without using glyphosate, because one of the things we're really concerned about is the loss of glyphosate. So this is spraying this year, the drilling this year into green. It was round up about 4 days before. It had oats in it, so it needed the glyphosate. And that's it come up on the 11th of June. Most of that cover crop has just been eaten away by what's in the soil. If we hadn't had the cover crop, we would have had our drilling would have been delayed by about 3 weeks, because nobody else could travel. It's only because we had the cover crop that we could travel. After Groundswell 2019, we went and came back with a 3-meter GD on a caddy for our other crops other than maize, and it worked well on small seeds, but we were struggling for depth with beans, because we got on very flinty soil, and it was hard to get the discs in, and it showed quite a bit of disc wear. I'm sorry, it seems to like skipping one. So to put the beans in, Robert Gent in Lincolnshire was advertising a KV cultivator which had put sabre tines on, and we bought that for about £5,000 and fitted it behind the GD caddy, and that worked extremely well. One of the reasons for going with the discs was to deal with maize stalks that had been knocked over by the harvester. But we found that this drill had such big clearance between the rows that it cleared maize stalks quite well, and the following rake also cleared the maize stalks. So we now use that for everything. We sold the GD and bought a front hopper off weaving. And if we get to the next one, that one. So this year we've we've also found that the the Sabertine conversion, which worked well on fen soil, didn't like our flints. And unfortunately, the welds between the Sabertines and the mountings gave up. So we then went and got some Metcalfe points and fittings, took off the KV flat plates where the tines bolted on, welded in some box section, and bolted on the Metcalfe points using the weaving seed boots with the air escape. We also took the opportunity to widen it from 5.6 meters to 6 meters, and we put more substantial depth wheels because we were getting through the tire almost every time we took it out. And we also shortened the covering rake frame to reduce the weight. This is it in maize stubble. We have no planned changes for this autumn, although we don't know what's going to happen. This we also use it for stitching herbal seed into our dairy grazing. This was not sprayed off. I think in another time I would spray it off because the ryegrass is a bit too aggressive. That that is bean oat mix drilled with this drill, and 3 varieties of winter barley drilled with this drill. That was taken at the end of May, and that's it.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Stephen. That's really fascinating from my point of view, anyway, because it's quite obvious that you do things and then you see how they can be improved, and you've got the confidence to get the gas out and do a bit of cutting around and sticking things together and so on. But I think that what I would really take in is the way in which all the detail of the farm fits in with that first diagram that you gave us, with your income stream and your expenditure and how you got there and how one type of thing, and it reminds me of Ellen MacArthur, who I'm a big fan of for many reasons, I'm sure. But she has this real passion for a recycling economy where waste is one enterprise feeds another and feeds a third and a fourth and so on. So that it's a kind of circular economy, and I think that it looks as if this is exactly what you're doing, and you're no doubt under her influence, as I am. So anyway, I could ask just one question, and that is that I noticed that one of your earlier drills may still be there, I don't know, uses these small little hoppers on the back. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a standard maize drill.
Is it?
Absolutely standard maize drill on the back of the legs and the rotavator.
Right, and with the small hoppers, is there any benefit in that as opposed to having one?
It's a precision drill with each unit is independently floating.
Yes, and I suppose there are fewer less blockages and that kind of thing. Are there?
It's just the way we normally drill maize.
Yeah. All right, thanks. And anyway, it's really good. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. Yes, Guy, I'm on to you now. Guy Halsey, and we've only met 5 minutes ago, but I was impressed, and so I hope you will be too. I'm sure you will. But if you can give us a lowdown as to why you're here and that kind of thing, that would be really good.
Well, that's very kind, Mike. Thank you. I think this talk is called Homemade Drills. It can probably be called Mr. Horsch Can Sleep Easy. But anyway, this is just a rundown of my zero-till or direct drill experiments over the years and various successes and deferred successes. and we farm in the Chilterns, not a million miles from here, but very different landscape. Hills, clay, lots of flints, as you can see. This is some of the worst, but it's not all like that. But it's pretty wet. We've got no land drains. We've got no ditches. We've got it's a predicted establishment percentage of about 60% or lower on about half the area of the farm, and 2/3 of it is sort of 65% or lower. So it's very sticky clay. It wears, obviously you can see from that picture, a lot of metal, a lot of rubber, and a lot of back windows. But it's good, strong wheatland, and trying to find an efficient, a cheap, and a really sort of versatile drilling solution, I guess, is why we're sort of going down this route. So I sort of started off thinking, well, what did I need? First one was. There we are. So cheap wearing metal is, I guess, the first criteria, and no, if I can possibly avoid it, no bearings, and which obviously automatically rules out anything with a disc, because they become very expensive. I've only got 200 horsepower, which I know is quite a big tractor in some people's minds, but when you're pulling, or you had in this case a contractor pulling a 3 meter solo and press with 400 horsepower, 200 doesn't seem very many. Consolidation is vital. It is, particularly with the flint sort of holding the soil away from the seed. Seed to soil contact and having something that was going to consolidate pretty well is the key between sort of success and failure. As is the ability, as I say, to travel when wet, because there are when it gets wet, it stays wet. But as I've learned along this journey, you can have a wonderful drill that will put the soil in the ground, or put the seed in the ground in pretty much any conditions. But that's no guarantee it's going to grow. In some ways, it's actually quite a good idea to have something that doesn't go when it's wet, because then you save a bit of seed. Trash flow, obviously limited by having a tine rather than a disc, but to be able to go into we chop all our straw, to have a very, very good chopper on a contractor's combine, but still to be able to get trash through is essential. Range of seeds, so to be able to drill, obviously, hopefully to be able to drill anything from beans to clover. Ideally, you want it to sort of hook up and go, no sort of messing around, and you want it to work. It doesn't always happen. And then I guess ultimately it's obviously cost per metre. I know from a little bit of research that you don't have to try too hard to spend £20,000 a metre on a new zero-till drill of whichever flavour you like. So I didn't really want to spend that, particularly when direct drilling for us is only works certain times in the rotation and in certain circumstances, although we are getting better at it. Right, so here's attempt number one. This is a Horsch CO4, which I sort of bought before they were cool, and it was a slight mistake on my part, and I got it out of the back of a neighbour's shed, and on closer inspection, the headstock had been snapped off and welded on not straight, which was a pretty bad start, and the rear packer arm was the sort of shape of a banana. Which meant that one side of the drill was about 4 inches in the ground deeper than the other side, and it didn't consolidate the outside; it only consolidated in the middle. So I learnt what not to look for, or rather what to look for, pretty quickly. But sort of persevered with it, and I put some Metcalf coulters on, the sort of 12mm narrow points on 25 250mm spacings. And I then which was fine, worked pretty well. I bought an old front hopper at a farm sale, and then for spring crops put DAP in there, and then I piped it I put a Y piece in the seed tube on every coulter. So I had 2 distribution heads, 2 fans, and blowing DAP down the spout into the same slot via these Y pieces. That did work pretty well. Balancing fan speeds and air pressure, I'm no expert in fluid dynamics, but it sort of had a few quirks to it. I think some vents would have probably been a good idea, because sometimes it would decide that it was going to send all the fertilizer to the outside coulters, for instance, which you'd only know when your rate was twice the height on the edges as it was in the middle. But that was it did work reasonably well. The front hopper was it was very sort of cheap and cheerful farm sale job. It worked pretty well. Very simple, no electrics other than a low seed sort of monitor, which was handy. But again, cheap and cheerful and pretty effective. And then you can just see probably on the back there, this was when I was really going for it. I put a ancient stocks small seeder mounted above the rear packer to dribble some clover seed for undersowing of spring crops, sort of theoretically between the rows, and that ended up being quite a lot of buttons to press at the when you're on your ins and outs, and sometimes forgetting. And it also meant, you can see we're on there's some hills there, and if you ever tried to sow white clover seed, it runs like water. And if you're drilling across the slope, all the clover runs to one end of the hopper, and you sort of don't get any at the other end. So that wasn't great, but again, it was a good learning experience. And so the drill generally did a pretty good job. It did have a few issues. Well, as I say, the frame had been badly abused, and it didn't quite do everything I wanted it to do. And then the electrics packed up entirely, and so that went on a lorry. And so we went on to the next. Now, not a great picture, but this started life as a 3-meter box drill, Aitchison drill, 24 tines in 3 meters. And very simple, very straightforward. Did a reasonable job, but 24 tines in 3 meters, only had to hear the word "not grass," and it I had heart failure, as did it. So I thought, well, it's 3 meters. Why don't I make what's quite simple rather more complicated, and extended it to 4 meters by some good sort of bodgery. And stuck some little wings on the side and spread the same number of times out over 4 meters. Ran it off the front hopper, so it was seed only, but it was pretty simple. Had a little covering harrow, and it did a reasonable job. On our ground, we had some decent crops with it. It did a good job putting the seed in the ground. It had a few issues with losing points and very quick, and wore a lot of metal. So it wasn't wholly successful, but it did do, in the right circumstances, it did a very good job. It was a very simple drill, and cheap to buy new. But the thing that it really lacked was the consolidation, particularly on spring crops. And I ended up, although I had a following harrow on it, I had to run behind with some grass harrows at an angle, just to sort of really, I guess, fill in the slots and cover the seed. And that did make a big difference, but that then becomes another pass, and it's sort of slightly less than ideal, particularly if you're rolling as well. And so on to the next. I think one of the main reasons for getting rid of that one was, as I say, the cost and the cost of wearing / losing metal was probably our biggest issue. So on to the next. Now, I didn't make the base drill here. It started life as a shakerator, and it was then extended by somebody else to become a bean drill. So behind every shakerator leg is a bean, or is a pigtail tine, with a bean coulter effectively behind it. It's 4¼ meters wide. It has some ex-Fadistat depth wheels on it. It's obviously on a land wheel, and it's quite a big lump. It is not. It's not no-till, I think I would probably describe it. but it is. I bought it, funny enough, actually, really because I needed some cheap legs, and it was pretty cheap, and it just so happened that it had the drill. The drill came with it. And so I set about thinking, well, actually, look, why don't we try and do something with this? Because it's ineffectively a sort of very poor man's Claydon. We might be onto something. So I got it in the workshop on a snowy day, and what I did was behind each leg, kept obviously the pigtail behind it, but put a splitter boot on and put a wider, sort of 7-inch share. So basically, the back end is almost identical to a Claydon, and in order to lower it down, because you'll see from, if I can go back, no, it doesn't want to go back, the difference between, there we are, one more, the difference in height between the shake rater point and the bean coulter was really quite a lot. So what I did was I got another section of 100mm box and put it below the back leg, the back beam, to lower the final row down, so that the level of the coulter was about 50 mils or less above the point of the shake rater, and then did the same with the second row, which is in between the second row of shake rater points, with small sections of box, and so it's become, there we are, it's become effectively a Claydon type machine. Now it's pretty inconvenient at 4¼ meters wide. It's good at widening gateways, and it's a fairly blunt tool. But in terms of an establishment, sort of a combination of a sort of a cheap establishment method, it is potentially something that it's very early days for us in terms of actually using it, but it is something. Yes, it'll drill beans, definitely. Can I get it to drill smaller seeds and cereals? We will see. Now I don't know if this is going to work. There we go. So this is a few weeks ago in some horrible ground, absolutely baked like concrete, and it is obviously not the finest seed bed that anyone's ever seen. We've got a few issues, principally depth control on heavy ground. When 13 shake rater legs decide they want to go into the ground, there's not much you can do to stop them. I've found, and they've sort of popped the tires off the depth wheels and so on. So I think probably the ultimate iteration of this will be something a bit less aggressive than the shake rater leg on the front. Something a bit more like the Claydon. Quite what that is, I don't know. But that is that's the sort of, I guess, some of the experiments.
Thanks very much, Guy. Gosh, you've taken us through a generation or two of homemade machinery. I mean, that's absolutely extraordinary. And again, somebody who doesn't mind picking up the welder and sort of following your nose, as it were, and getting down with it. I dug out some. I mean, I don't know whether now's the time to do it, but I dug out a few figures the other day. I'm quite interested in figures, and from the Agri budgeting book, Anderson's ABC, which I find fascinating, bedtime reading. Just the thing. The charges for direct drilling, contract charges, about 72 to 90 pound a hectare, something like that. And of course, you have to spend that every year. So you're talking about nearly 13,000 pounds to drill 161 hectares or 400 acres. The depreciation of a drill that's set you back between, say, 75 and 120,000 pounds is really quite considerable. You're talking about at least 10,000 pounds a year just on depreciation. And I mean, I'm looking at these figures and the noughts and so on and so forth, because I think most of us really perhaps have farms that aren't as large or financially able to carry these kind of figures if there's an alternative way. And I think that what we've see here today is very much an alternative way. And is it something, Guy, that is it something that exercises you? Do you spend hours poring over the agricultural budgeting Anderson's book or budgeting book or not?
I wish, yes, I do. I should probably spend a bit more time doing it, but I do very much so, and I'm very aware. I mean, I've always treated cultivation and establishment costs of almost like a variable cost, knowing the sort of the cost per hectare of every single operation. So that's really why, or one of the reasons why, as well as obviously the sort of the whole soil health and reducing input piece, why we've I suppose been going down this route.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the answer that I expected, and it's certainly the answer that I think a lot of people, a lot of farmers, I don't necessarily sort of think about too much. It's all gets. I mean, I know if I buy anything new, like my new second-hand computer, I get really quite excited and over-exercised by it. And I think that's obviously is a difficulty, which it's something that can set farmers into. Anyway, we'll go on to our fourth speaker, and I haven't got Robin Pick, Yorkshire, and he's built his own drill, and he's had some pretty good experiences which he'd like to share. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you very
and
much,
we're right.
Mike.
And we're right on Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're in
good.
the right
Okay.
county
Well,
as well,
look,
so that's good,
I'll
so.
hand you over to yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
So yeah, as I said, I've got a bit of a presentation for everybody today. Some of you may see, some have seen some of these pictures before. But as I said, so the first thing I thought would be kind of an interest, reasons why, or why we decided to have a go at building something ourselves. First and most important, it wasn't actually to save cost. We, farm only a couple of 100 acres in the Vale of York, some quite high magnesium, heavy clays. We had a pretty basic, simple system, some discs, a press, various drill options. And so basically we wanted to have a bit of a go at direct drilling, have a bit of a go. But as I said, for various reasons, last couple of springs we sort of had issues with moisture loss. Obviously, if you run some discs through heavy clay in March, April, you can end up with some quite large breeze blocks that you then need to try and beat into some form of a seed bed if the weather goes against you. And also, as some of the autumns hadn't been that helpful over the last few years. We thought tines were more flexible, and chose an off-the-shelf unit. Sort of go through those in a bit. I chose a front hopper and rear toolbar. We only had a 115 horsepower tractor available, so yeah, nothing massive. I said only a couple of 100 acres. And also the last thing was I thought, well, at least if it all goes completely pear-shaped, I might actually have some value in the front hopper when I chuck the rest of it in the scrap skip. So at least there was some value there. And also as well going forward, and you sort of see as I go through the presentation, having a front hopper, I can try different things. We can have some different toolbar bits and pieces and kind of go from there. So yeah, first thing, frame build. So as I said, we'd sort of looked out in the marketplace for various tine options. Weaving did a bolt-on saber tine kit, so complete unit. And so we reached out to them, and they were more than helpful in this sort of journey, selling us units. We went for a 3-meter frame just because it didn't have to have any of the complexities of folding or any of that intricacies. The weaving tines are designed for an 80mm box, so obviously the frame was laid out on an 80mm box. I can't quite remember off the top of my head the wall thickness, but it's a really thick wall that they sort of recommended. We then got various frame profiles laser cut, so we kind of laid it out. I did the usual back of a fag packet to work out how we were going to put it all together. I got some profiles laser cut that actually form the linkage mounting and the rear following harrow frame and mounting. I did actually, as you can see in the thing, find the worst piece of concrete on the farm, so I do apologise to try and build this on, but it was about all the only space I had left at that point in autumn 2020. So yeah, laid it all out, laid all the frame out, went through it from the ground up. The frame came together really well. In terms of tine layouts, there's 18 tines in a 3-meter, so we cut a notch So to get the tines to sit in a configuration that we were reasonably happy with, we basically cut out various notches there in the center of the back frame to actually allow us to get the tine space in between that we wanted for those 18 Sabre Time units. Headstock, well again, as I said, the lower linkage arms, they were the link pins, they were all formed by the laser cut plates that we got done. The headstock just became a box section frame with some supports back onto the main part of the drill. Again, fairly simple, fairly straightforward, all laid out, just sit under a building on the workshop. Seat tube, again, we sort of, in terms of seat tube, we reached out to, again, not reinventing the wheel, we reached out to various sort of manufacturers, and somebody said, yeah, no worries, we'll supply you the complete seat tube as is. It was basically an Accord seat tube, 24 outlet. We're only using 18 rows, so 6 plugged, but again, off the shelf. Made all of the back frame. Seat mounting and depth wheels, as I said, we sort of played out, you know, I mean, as I said, once we got the 2 notches cut in on the main frame for the tine mounting, cut that out, then laid out all the tines in terms of trying to get them to fit in the frame in an order. Obviously needed some form of depth control, so I went and found something that looked reasonable, which happened to be on the, we had an old Cooper's topsoiler flat lift in the yard, so I went and borrowed those on permanent loan. For the direct drill, so yeah, as I said there, now sort of they've gone from one device to another, but again very basic, just jack legs to do some relatively primitive, but I said works reasonably well, depth control. Painting, well, it kind of was getting late in autumn when we did this, so there was various people, my kids and whatever, got given a paintbrush and a can of Amorite at that point to at least stop it rusting. So yeah, as I said, it's sort of the finest Amorite green, and as I said, it probably needs another coat, but at the moment it's sort of there's always other things that you seem to be able to do rather than finishing what you've kind of 95% got started. So yeah, so as I said, that was the toolbar. Final layout, as I said, it basically was front hopper, so the hopper we bought second hand, been used I think in some other projects. Yeah, we put it together to allow us to do that. Hydraulic fan, which obviously made it a little bit easier. And then yeah, rear toolbar. I said that's it in its final configuration. So as I said, Sabre tines, depth wheels, following arrow. The following arrow is actually, I know when we were talking about it with various people, the following arrow is probably one of the most critical parts of it. They're really quite heavy duty following arrow tines. And it does help to drag quite a bit of soil over the back of the slots. In terms of it, as I said, nothing major. As I said, we have a very basic, a little 115 horsepower tractor. In terms of what we do, it's more than happy moving and pulling it around. As I said, to drill my 150 acres of crops, works really well. Hopefully the video will play. So as I said, we've been using it, this is its 4th season coming up. As I said, does a very good job of putting seed in the ground and in a very basic way. And as I said, have some options. In terms of costs, so I said the hopper was about £1,600. There was various little bits we needed to do to it. So there was a rubber flap that perished. There was a set of drive gears. It was set for, for 3 meters. 4 meters, not 3 meters. And so that was about £1,750 all in. So again, I thought, well, if we have an option, then we can always sell that on. Because I said it's only a small tractor, it only has gear pump hydraulics. We found at the end of the first year it was getting a little bit hot in terms of running the fan all the time. So I put an oil cooler on, on the return line, just to give it some extra help on cooling the hydraulic oil. If you add up, as I said, there's 18 tines. I think there were 145 pounds at that point from weaving complete. So as I said, they were more than helpful and more than happy to sell us whatever bits we wanted in terms of that. If you add up all the laser, the steel, the distribution head, hoses, I think it was in that sort of 4.5 to 5k. To be brutally honest, I never sort of added up all the final bills, but that's where we're talking. And so yeah, about £7,500, excluding my time, which was a couple of evenings and weekends and basically welding it together, because I have other sort of interests and options. So that was, as I said, just to give an idea, and as I said, it's worked really well. A few crop pictures. So as I said, I think it's one of those things, once you sort of start on this, you start to get a bit more, you start to experiment a bit more. So this was some spring barley last year, the drilling pick, and then various pictures in the growing season. So as I said, we went into some stubble turnips. They'd been rounded off a few days, probably a week before. And then, as I said, there's 3 pictures following. So emergence, tillering, sort of stem extension, and then harvest. So as I said, it's amazing once you sort of start this, how quickly the cover crops, and as I said, my agronomist was having heart failure when he saw me doing this one afternoon, sort of thinking, how was all this going to work? But as I said, it was amazing how quickly the cover crop disappears into the soil and into the actual, I mean, give it a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks after drilling, maybe a month, you barely even know there was even a cover crop there. So as I said, it's sort of amazing how quickly it disappears after. Some winter wheat. So this is this year. So the autumn picture on the bottom left. One thing, as I said, for those who are or are looking to experiment, it does look at times quite scruffy. I mean, as I said, you can walk into a field. Sometimes you look at it and go, have we actually drilled this? There's sort of bits and pieces of straw and trash and everything around, but it does come up. Some of the fellow presenters have shown. I mean, it's quite amazing actually sometimes what will come out after the fact. As I said, sometimes as well as you get it slightly different growth stages. The wheat, as I said, it was taken the other about a week ago when I was doing the T3 ear wash. You can sometimes get slightly different heights and growth stages, but again, from my point of view, it all ends up in the combine the same, and no major issues. Yeah, as I said, various different ones, emergence. Yeah, as I said, overall, it's done everything that we wanted it to do. Yeah, it makes a really good bean drill. Those weaving, as I said, we don't have stones or any of those issues. Those weaving tines make a really good bean drill. Puts those in the ground really well, and as I said, the beans seem to come up. Yeah, as well as we'd had previously. So just to finish, what would I change and what have I learnt? So I said, end of the first sort of season, we had an oil cooler. That was more probably a function of the tractor, but it's kind of what I had. So it was the easiest thing was to add the oil cooler onto the drill. It's on the front hopper, and yeah, replumbed it for a 3/4 return. Drainage has to be 100%. I think it kind of probably applies for most things, but it seems to be in direct drilling. I said we farmed some quite heavy flat clays. If your drainage isn't up to 100%, and I've probably spent more time on the digger, cleaning ditches, making sure drain outfalls are flowing, excuse me, in the last 3 and a bit years than I ever have previously. As I said, it just direct drilling just won't work if it's really boggy and wet. And so yeah, that's probably one of the main takeaways. I say if people think they're going to block up ditches and let the beavers loose, they're probably going to be in for a shock on that side. So that's probably one of the things that our biggest takeaway. Straw residue, probably the second biggest one. As I said, from my point of view, the straw residue is probably, yeah, that's the one thing I need to improve. I have a sort of smaller, older combine or a contractor, depending who does it, and I mean, if you're cultivating, if you're ploughing, probably doesn't have to be as tip-top as it should be. But as I said, last year, especially with it being so dry, I don't know if it was the straw didn't start to rot as quickly, or but there was quite a lot of, even with my 4 rows of tines, there was quite a few evenings of basically turning it into a 3-meter straw rake, and it basically just ended up with a big heap. So as I said, that's one of the things that I think we're working on for this year, is to try and get our straw residue management better. Especially, I mean, last year I think a lot of people had some, us included, had some very good crops. Trying to get rid of that straw was one of those things that I said we're going to try and change. The front hopper offers some flexibility. As I said, we picked up an alternative toolbar for this year just to try something different. Be patient. I think it's probably one of the takeaways a lot of people always say is that my failures, and I've had a few, come from rushing, especially on clays. Is that in the spring everybody else is drilling, so you're kind of in that position of we need to get going, and then when the slugs are romping around in the spring barley because it's slotted a bit, and you're then kind of fighting them, or you're having to roll it. So as I said, that would probably be another one is be patient. As I said, failures happen, but try and learn from them. It doesn't help. It's not a magic cure for blackgrass. It helps. As I said, like everybody, I'm sure if you walk around, you know, I mean, a lot of places, ours included, there's a bit of blackgrass. And secondly, be flexible. I think that's one of the things. We've tried multiple things. This year we had a bit of a nightmare. I picked quite a tall cover crop. It went woody after desiccation. It ended up with like 4 foot of basically small twigs. They just wrapped on everything on the toolbar. So we ended up having to just lightly take the discs through it first, just to basically chop them up. As I said, I could probably have sat there. I think it was Easter Sunday. My wife was already asking why I hadn't been home the 6 hours earlier that I'd promised her for Easter to see the kids and do Easter eggs. As I said, so we ended up having to get the discs out and basically just chop things up lightly to try and to basically get the cover crops through. So as I said, be flexible. I think that's probably my final point. So that's me.
Well, thank you very, very much, Robin. I mean, it's £10,000. Not bad at all. No, yes. We've got a few minutes, and I'm sure you've got a load of questions to ask. We've got 4 people who are experts in their field, and they know a lot about it, and they're here to help. So if you have got anything, please raise your hand now. Still thinking? Still thinking? Certainly, I mean, as far as being an observer, as it were, one of the things that I find extraordinary when I go around farms, and particularly farms where they've got workshops, is just how different each one is. You know, how different the results are from their designs and so on. I went on a farm fairly recently, and what a huge machine he had ended up building, a drill on a 6-meter drill, which was so heavy it weighed 9.5 tons, and he had a 200 and something horsepower tractor, and it didn't shift it much. So he had to go out and buy another tractor which was 380 horsepower. And you begin to sort of think, well, this is DIY going mad, really. But I got to say that. But it is extraordinary how people can perhaps not get carried away exactly, but you know, you can start on an engineering project and you add this and you add that and add the other. But if we've got no more questions, can we please raise our hands and applaud our speakers?